April was not my month, and that's okay. I was busy. Reading wasn't my priority, but I did still read 5 books, which in my mind is really freaking good still. I actually didn't do too bad on page count either. The 5 books ended up being 2,392 pages, which I typically read in the like 4,000 to 5,000 range. So I halved it, which is honestly not the worst reading month I think I've ever had. This averages out to be 80 pages a day for me, and the average page count of a book that I read this month was 478 pages, which typically I'm in like the low 300 average page count range, so it means I was picking up bigger books even though I was picking up less of them. My most read genre, like every single month this year so far, was fantasy romance. I am riding the fantasy romance high currently, and I don't see it stopping. However, the indie fantasy train is calling to me. I think you're gonna see a lot of those coming up soon. But when I say it wasn't my month, I mean it, because although I was still reading, I read a 0 5 stars and 0 4 stars. I had 3 3 stars and 2 2 stars. I did have 0 1 stars, which at the end of the day, that's not that bad. So my average star rating was 2.6, which is not where I like it to sit at. I read 2 new releases, 1 backlist book, and 2 last year releases. Genre-wise, I read 3 fantasy romances, 1 traditionally published fantasy, and 1 indie published fantasy. Overall, I'm proud of that I read so much still. However, reading is fun for me, and I love reading, so like, I'm sad that I didn't prioritize it a little bit more. However, April was a really fun month for me outside of reading. For 2 weeks, I spent time with some of my friends here on BookTube as we all got together to go to a polycon together, and it was a lot of fun. Not a lot of reading was done during those weeks, so I can't be mad at myself for reading less than I normally did, because I prioritized other things in my life that made me happy, and as long as I'm doing things that make me happy, I'm okay with where my reading sits at. If reading is the thing making me happy, let's read 20 books in a month. But if watching TV or hanging out with friends is, let's read 5 books in a month, 2 books in a month, 1 book in a month, it's fine. I do wish, however, that the 5 books I had read this month were 5 and 4 stars. But let's get into the real reviews and talk about why they didn't make it there. The first book I read this month was a letdown. I'm so sorry. This is one of my 2 stars, and I was so excited for this. I thought this was a 5-star prediction. I thought I was going to love this story. I've seen the hype everywhere. When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This was my last minute get this in before a polycon, but it also was part of the Dragon vlog. The things that didn't work for me in this book are very personal to me, and I understand why a lot of people love this. It's hard to give you my thoughts on this because I think in some ways a lot of them are spoilers. There are things that I didn't love. There's a trope in this that just like grinds my gears and makes it really hard for me to enjoy a book when it has that trope. It just makes characters feel murky to me, and I just like don't love that trope, which means I don't love books that have that trope. When the Moon Hatched is this world where the creators made dragons. When dragons decide to pass away, they're done. They sometimes decide to fly up to the sky and they fossilize in like a moon. But over time, sometimes these dragons, the moons they've created, fall down to the planet, and the people on the planet take advantage of the magic that the dragon bones have. We're following our main character, whose name is Rave. She is an assassin. She is trying to take down the hierarchy from the assassin side. She is trying to feed the poor. She really believes that the people in power are corrupt and she needs to take them down, and the only way to do this is by joining the like rebellion, which is also not the greatest people, but they're better than the people in power, and sacrifices have to be made, and so and so. However, she gets caught and she's turned into a political statement, and only death will set her free. And then our main love interest is on a quest to hunt some of these dragon bones down, and he falls upon her and helps her escape. This is a really hard book to sum up. Although it's a fantasy romance, it definitely goes to like that grand scale of more of your traditional epic style fantasies. There's a quest story in here. There is traveling and adventure, and not just about the 2 characters and them falling in love. And I think that'll really work for a lot of people. For me, I felt murky. I wanted it to focus on either the plot or the romance, and it felt like it was trying too hard to do both, and neither was achieving well enough for me. The writing style also controversial. Some people vibe with it. Some people hate it. I did not like it. It is very wordy. It is this really lyrical, whimsy, overly descriptive writing style. It left my brain confused. I didn't understand things happening, and then like I was like, why are some things overly described and other things not? This book really makes you use its glossary. It uses terms in the world. You don't know them. They're not explained. You have to look them up in the glossary, and I'm like, well, why was the way she walks overly described, but what we call a dragon that's not a dragon because it's called called something else not better explained to me? Like, why did I have to use the glossary for that? Just a pet peeve of mine in books. I feel like I don't want to have to look in a glossary. I want the writing to do it for me. I want the glossary to be there for if and when I need it, but I don't want to rely on the glossary. Overall, I just didn't love this one. It's only a duology and it just got picked up. I do think I will be continuing it because I was interested enough. If it was a trilogy, I don't think I would continue, but for a duology, I think I'm going to. Next up, I read To Shape a Dragon's Breath. Okay, in the stats, this is a 2-star. In my review in the Dragon vlog, it was a 3-star. When I put this through the spreadsheet, it got a 2-star, and it just felt right to me. Sadly, this book did not vibe with me. This is an incredible book full of representation, but the writing style also did not vibe for me on this one. To Shape a Dragon's Breath follows our main character, who finds a dragon egg. She is an indigenous woman, and the dragons have not been found on her island for a really long time. She ends up finding this dragon egg and bonding with this dragon. It's a whole discourse because the white people have taken over the world and they are assimilating them into their culture like we like to terribly do. And she is forced to go to the dragon school because the dragons are under the white people's jurisdiction, or else they're going to kill her and her dragon and maybe her island. The school doesn't really care about her. It is meant for her to fail, and she knows one thing: she's going to succeed. She's not going to let them kill her or her dragon, and she's going to prove them all wrong. The discussions in this story are beautifully, beautifully done. That's why I gave it 3 stars in my vlog, because I was like, I understand that this didn't work for me, but it is a beautifully written story at its core, and I think the things that I didn't like were very stylistic. It really feels like verbal storytelling. It feels like spoken word over written word, which I think is stylistic because I know in indigenous cultures, spoken word stories are such a heavy part of their culture, and it's incredible to see them pass down these stories through generation just through using spoken word. However, when it comes to reading, I really wanted to visualize things. I wanted to feel like I was there, like I am the main character versus me being told a story of the main character. And that just was a really big struggle for me to get past and enjoy the story, because I just felt like I was being told things were happening in this storytelling style versus experiencing them, experiencing my character's emotions. I was told she was mad at this point because something happened. I didn't get to experience her being mad, and that just really didn't work for me, and it left me feeling like underwhelmed by the story. And I kind of wish there had been a little bit more world building. I wish I had understood more about the dragons and the worlds. I'm still happy I read it because I do think the conversation was really beautiful. Then I picked up Spark the Everflame. This was the last book in that dragon vlog, and this was the win for me in the dragon vlog. I only gave it 3 stars, but after 2 books that I felt very mid about, it felt nice to give a 3-star out that I was enjoying and like really, really wanting to continue. At first I didn't think this was going to be for me, but the last half of this amped up, revved up, and got my motor going, and I was ready to continue. We're following a world where it was colonized by gods. The gods came and they fell in love with mortals, and instead of wanting to watch the mortals die and have to live on and find more love afterwards, they tied their souls to the lives of the mortals they fell in love with. They said, when this mortal dies, when my wife dies, I too will die with her. And with that, they left the world to be ruled by their descended, their kids that came, that were half god, half human. Centuries have passed, and the descended aren't necessarily the nicest. They've forgotten that they are half human, and they only think about the half god part and the power they have and how they're stronger and bigger and better than the mortals. Dian comes in, and she has been raised in this world. She has been told to avoid the descended at all costs. They are mean, they are cruel, do not go near them, do not enter the castle. However, Dian's mom is a healer, and she actually heals the descended in the castle because there's something wrong that their magic can't heal, and they don't have healers because they've always relied on their magic. So a human healer has to go heal them. When her mom disappears, Dian takes up that mission. She decides to take her mother's place and go help them in the castle. However, there was a reason that her mother told her, do not go into the castle, avoid the descended, and she's gonna find out what that reason was. Dian frustrated me. That is why this book could not get more than 3 stars, because she had a lack of agency in the story that really, really bothered me. There was a lot of plot holes happening, and I was very unsure. Like, I just couldn't get behind Dian as a character because it was leading to plot holes, because she just had a lack of agency. She didn't question anything. She just, like, accepted her fate and did what people told her to do, and I was just like, where's the critical thinking here? Let's think about this just for a second. Like, just a second. You can still do the not smart thing, but just think it through first. Maybe ask a question here or there. And so I really really struggled with the first half as they were setting Dean up to be this like badass main character because I didn't feel like she was. And so that was really the downfall of this book for me. But the upfall, what is it called? The uphill that we went on was the love interest who I really vibed with when he was on paper. He does not get enough scenes. He's like barely in this book, to be honest. People were telling me it was slow burn, and I did not feel like this was a slow burn book. There was just very few scenes with him, but I didn't think that made it slow burn because the scenes with him, they were definitely like instantly attracted to each other and liking each other. I've learned a little bit about how slow burn is used very differently depending on the person. So like slow burn for me is about like the relationship as a whole, but I find a lot of people use the term slow burn, meaning there was no intercourse on paper until like later on. But I mean like the whole relationship needs to be slow burn. I want to see the tension and the fire crackling as they like learn to like love each other and see that they're interested in each other. Like that's a slow burn for me. And this was not that. They don't kiss for a very long time, but they're instantly vibing with each other. Like I wanted a little bit more like crackling between them. I wanted to see the slow sparks as the fire built up and up and up. Get it? Pun? Sparks? Fire? Flame? I don't know. But I really did like him when he was on paper. I wish that there was more of him, but overall, like, he is what made the story, like, progress to a higher 3 for me and made me want to continue. I liked the ending. I thought the ending was really good. I'm intrigued by the plot. I'm intrigued enough by the world building, even though I struggled with it, that, like, I'm going to continue this, and I think I'm going to enjoy the series as a whole. I think the first half of this book just had to, like, find its footing for me. Then for my scavenger hunt vlog, I ended up picking up Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Rowick. Now, everyone had been screaming about this one, and so I thought this was also going to be a 5-star prediction. In the end, I gave it 3 stars. I'm trying to figure out how to tell you what didn't work for me in this book, but I'm struggling a little bit. But this book follows our main character, Scarlet, who is one of the 3 mighty assassin sisters. She's owned by the assassin lord, and her sisters work together, and they're like the most feared assassins. Something happened that made her like turn her back a little bit on the assassin, and she has escaped to her old life a little bit when she is given a deal, work for the assassin again, kill this one person, and get the information she needs to get revenge against the Fae Fire Prince that is the person who killed her mother. Seems like an easy decision, but when feelings get involved, it gets very, very, very complicated, and Scarlet is struggling and doesn't know what to do. I think the main problem for me with this book was I went in expecting a fantasy romance, and I feel like I got a fantasy with romance. Like, there is a definitely heavy importance to the romance in this. It reminds me of, like, YA fantasy a little bit, where, like, the romance is very, very important to the plot line, but there is, like, a really strong fantasy plot going on, and not every scene revolves around the 2 characters. But when I think of fantasy romance, I think of a little bit more of a importance on the characters and their relationship. And so I think it was just expectations for me that didn't work out, because I wanted more scenes of the 2 love interests together. I wanted less plot at times. I liked the plot. I want there to be plot, but I also want to see the characters interact a lot on paper. I want to see them giggle and laugh and have a good time together. I want to see them fight and struggle together. I just like feel like I missed scenes with the love interest in this. I think the main focus of this was the plot and not the romance, which is okay, and I think really works for a lot of people. Like, people are screaming about this book, and I'm gonna continue. I liked the ending. I liked it overall. I just think my expectations were a little bit different going into this, and I'm kind of starting to learn what I like in what people call fantasy romance, and like, it's just a balancing act, because as I said before, we all use the same terms, but sometimes we don't mean the same things, and it's just like a universal term that we use, and I think that can sometimes make things struggle. I know there's an argument of like romantasy versus fantasy romance, and like fantasy romance being a little more fantasy heavy and romantasy being not. We're using words and we mean them in a way, and not everyone uses them in the same way, and that's okay, because there's not a definitive definition always on things, and interpretation is different, and things are subjective, and that's okay. But it's been easier for me to now be like, I prefer my fantasy romance to have a little bit more importance on the 2 characters than an epic plot line. And this is something this book really taught me. I definitely think this would be something I would suggest for people who are trying to go from YA fantasy to adult fantasy. I think that this would be a really good place to like jump into, because I think it crosses that border. Like, I would say this is like new adult fantasy to a T. Like, it fits that very well. And last on the list, and my favorite book that I read this month, was Deathless by Rob J. Hayes. This is part of the trilogy of trilogies. I feel like I've talked about this so much lately, and I'm gonna keep talking about it because it's honestly incredible. Rob J. Hayes is releasing 3 book ones this year. They are an interconnected world. You can read them as trilogies on their own, but the way he wrote them was for them all to kind of be read together. So you read all book 1s first, and you'll see like Easter eggs and connections between the 2, and then when book 2s get released next year, fingers crossed. We read all the book 2s as well. So you can read trilogy to trilogy to trilogy, or you can read book 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2 kind of vibe. This is the second prequel. So Harold is the main story, and then we have Deathless, which is the one I just read this month. That is 1,000 years before Harold, and then we have Demon, that's 1,000 years before Deathless. I've already read Demon. I really enjoyed Demon, so this was Deathless. At the time of filming this, I've actually already read Harold, and I really liked it, but like, let's talk about Deathless. Deathless is the political setup story, in my opinion. It is about the politics of the world, and it's a discussion on beliefs and society and things like this. It is a slower book than Demon. You don't really get the high stakes. You don't really understand what is happening until about 50%. In Deathless, we're following a king of the Holstein dynasty who has been ruling under the angels for a long, long, long time now. However, our king thinks that maybe the angels have been lying to him. And maybe not all is what it seems, and history has been rewritten, which is so much fun in my opinion. I didn't love this one as much. I don't think it stood on its own as well as Demon did. However, as something that is a part of this grander epic scale, I really felt like I understood why it existed, and I really enjoyed the Easter eggs and seeing the little pieces. After reading Harold, I think I appreciate Deathless a little bit more, but before Harold, it was a little bit like, what is this book for? Also, the ending of Deathless was like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. But I definitely recommend everyone pick this up as soon as it comes out. It is something I've never really seen done in this way before, but if you're fans of like Realm of the Elderlings or the Cosmere or the Michael J. Sullivan series with like Age of Myth and all that they're like grand epic worlds and they all interconnect and there's like Easter eggs, pick this up. I think you're going to love it. And I think Rob J. Hayes is just a wonderful, wonderful writer. I really just enjoy what he does. I would love to know down below what your favorite book of the month was. And if you're looking to hang out a little bit longer, here's my wrap up from last month on the screen. I read a lot more books than that. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me something with wings.